Anyone paying attention to social media and following the recent George Floyd media shitstorm has obviously noticed the huge outpouring of support for the Black Lives Matter movement and this relentless virtue signaling coming from almost every major corporation, all of the big game developers from Bethesda to Rockstar, Sony, Nintendo. I'm sure that Doritos and Mountain Dew are probably weighing in about now. This corporate feeding frenzy happening right now is the most cynical thing. I mean, I am genuinely nauseated by watching this shit play out. Because the more and more celebrities and just, absolute airhead women, white women especially, that come out onto social media, they step into the public space and they perpetuate this narrative that the Western world is a collection of white supremacist societies that exist and were created specifically to oppress minorities, especially black people, is a myth. And anyone with two fucking brain cells recognizes this. But a lot of people don't feel comfortable pointing it out. They don't feel comfortable even really thinking it a lot of the time. And this is due to the fact that our entire academic system is infested with anti-Western Marxist intellectuals who come from this long line of postmodern academics who founded their entire ideology as some kind of tool to deconstruct what they perceived as this fascist, capitalist, Western power structure, right? That's how they view Western civilization. And by proxy, white people, European culture, they view it through this extremely negative, subversive lens. And this is the ideological foundation for all of these bugmen from, Matt Lee's, Guardian journalists, and, Antifa, progressivism, the modern left. Their entire ideology was actually developed as a tool of critique to be used to dismantle, Western civilization, okay? And in America, there's this intersectional approach they take where they focus on race because that's a real easy way for them to, divide and conquer all of their opposition. And it's so hard to argue against that form of critique. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement is a good example of this. A lot of their arguments about white privilege and their racialized perspective in America are very, very similar to the Bolshevik idea of the privileged bourgeoisie versus, the oppressed proletariat, right? It's like the African American is eternally oppressed, and that any evidence of inequality is to do with this white oppression. White people in the US are the same thing as the bourgeoisie kulaks, the farmers in Bolshevik Russia, right? It's the same idea. And you see the left using these same methods of Marxist deconstructionism to relentlessly shill for communism, revolution, tearing down the pre-established power structures of the, racist or whatever, sexist, the left, they'll just shift the word out, right? But the prescription to these societal ills is always revolution, communism, and of course, censorship. And you can see the third wave feminists have just taken that Marxist blueprint and they've applied it to gender. Okay, so I'm saving you the trouble of having to research this yourself, okay? Because that's what it boils down to. This is the ideological foundation for all of the people freaking out on Twitter right now, from the black community to all of these awful soy-fueled leftists that are self-flagellating with this frenzy. It's like a religious fervor. We are witnessing a very cult-like religious form of hysteria right now. And it's all a bunch of baloney, guys. I mean, this is what this video is about. Don't fall for it. Don't think like you're the odd one out. Don't feel like you're crazy. Don't feel alienated. You're not crazy. It's these people, right? They have the loudest voice, they have the biggest platforms, and they have a microphone shoved in their face by a subversive media establishment that hates you and me. There's this huge anti-European fucking media-fed false narrative, and right now we're watching another shit show play out in real time. And this time, what triggered it? Some random black dude with a history of awful criminality, to the point where, he pointed a loaded firearm at a pregnant woman's belly. He was arrested with meth and fentanyl in his system, according to 2 separate autopsies. This guy is indefensible, just like Ahmaud Arbery, the infamous jogger. Just like Trayvon Martin, just like all of these sanctified black martyrs that they use as examples of systemic police brutality, corruption, and racism, right? It's just their method of deconstructing our institutions, especially the institution of law enforcement. This shit is obvious at this point. As millennials, we've lived through many events just like this one. Except this time, they have a lot more to lose, because have you noticed it's an election year? I certainly have. How fucking convenient, especially after this fucking ridiculous corona lockdown, where, okay, we can't go and have a fucking beer. I can't even go to the pub. But lo and behold, because of the disease of systemic racism in America, everyone in the entire Western world is now free to go out and protest. It's like we've forgotten there was ever a virus. This is insulting to my intelligence, right? And all of these fucking cucks on social media that are signal boosting this ridiculous anti-white narrative, they can just go fucking do one, as far as I'm concerned. I am done with this shit. When you go on Twitter and you look at all of these celebrities and all of these CEOs and corporations, all these egghead journalists, okay? And you just see this united front where they all agree on ideas that on the face of it make no fucking sense. You have to remember, imagine that our entire society and media was completely overrun with Scientologists, okay? It's basically the same thing, because Marxism and Scientology are both completely absurd and fail to account for objective reality, okay? These people have an agenda, and, I don't even think that they really know what it is. They've just become agents of this chaotic, irrational, and dangerous worldview, and they just hold water for it. They are the foot soldiers of this uncompromising, all-consuming Borg collective. And it's a coalition of leftists of varying levels of demoralization and virtue signaling women, hostile minorities being fed this victim narrative, combined with some very, very subversive and frankly malevolent people at the top. And those are the people that really understand what's going on. They're the ones that are teaching this shit to your kids. If I have kids, I'm going to send them to university and school, and they're going to be fed this insane, self-destructive worldview, intentionally, because there are people in this world that do not want to see Western civilization continue into the future. Very simple, very fucked up. And just going on Instagram the other day and looking at the, it's like this pathetic self-loathing that Europeans, white people, whatever you want to call them, they have been mind-fucked into oblivion. That's very clear to me now, watching this situation play out with the rioting and stuff. How hard is it for us to just point out this looting and destruction happening in our society is indefensible? It shouldn't be condoned, and I don't think the black community has any excuse for it, really. Literally no one is condoning police brutality. The best they can do is cling on to these subversive narratives of white supremacy and oppression, even though that narrative falls apart under the most mild scrutiny. And here's a video I'd really recommend. It's a video made by Candace Owens, where she, being a black woman, gives her perspective on this entire shit show. And frankly, she has probably the most rational and frankly right-wing take I've actually seen on this so far. Way better than any of these so-called conservative figures, aside from Tucker Carlson, most of these conservatives are they're completely cucking out for this false narrative, where they're lionizing George Floyd as being, he was just such a great man, he was a hero. It's like, well, he was a career criminal who robbed a pregnant woman at gunpoint. Okay, guys, sure thing. Okay, boomer, yeah. Hello, boomer department. And these corporations are obviously involved too, because they don't want us feeling any connection to our history or any loyalty to our, quote-unquote nations, because that doesn't really fly with this kind of technocratic globalist worldview that a lot of these multinational corporate entities are pushing on us, okay? They just want to be able to follow where the money goes and treat us like we are literally human cattle. But the point is, like, we are so far beyond the pale at this point where even our conservative politicians, who should kind of just be pushing back against this false narrative and saying, you know what, like, let's just call a spade here. The black community is responsible for itself and its issues, and it's really not this boogeyman of white supremacy that is holding their community back. It's the fact that they have a huge problem with antisocial criminal behavior, and they are out of control. Culturally, they have allowed themselves to be subverted by the same forces that are subverting the white community in the West. I think we're past the point of dancing around this issue. I mean, even Trump dances around it because he's thinking about the election. He's trying to shill for the black community, and he's trying to get their, he's trying to get their votes. It's politics, but it's also it's lying as well. It's bullshit. Our entire society is now being sucked into this bubble of anti-white resentment and hatred when, Jesus Christ, guys, take some responsibility for your own shit, all right? The answer to all of the black community's struggles and problems is not always racism and white supremacy. That is a false narrative being sold to all of us purely for the sake of demoralization and political control, okay? The quicker we all figure this out, the quicker we can move on from this. Both communities, Europeans, African Americans, we can all just say whatever, we're in a multicultural society. We're not going to balkanize and turn into, that's not happening. We're preserving the American Union. We're going to move on. We'll take care of our own shit, and we can both mutually benefit from that. Like, what happened to pragmatism? Well, of course, there's no room for pragmatic realism in a Marxist, demoralized, system. So fuck the left, honestly. That really is the answer to this issue. It's that we both need to figure this shit out, and we need to oust these sketchy subversives from our institutions, academia, the media, and our government. Just get them the fuck out. Send them to Guantanamo. And you know what? We'll both be chilling. Black people chilling with their barbecue, and I'll drive by in my Dodge Challenger. A tip of the cap to you guys. Good luck. Best of luck. And while we're at it, I think we should also send Anita to Guantanamo as well.